that announcement. Let's get a discussion going on this issue now. We're joined in studio by Dr. Sam Koma. He's head of the School of Governance at the Milpark Business School, and Advocate Paul Hoffman joining us via our Skype line. He's the director at Accountability Now. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us. We'll get Professor Hoffman up on the screen there. There he is behind us. Perhaps let's start in studio, Dr. Koma, with what this exactly means. I mean, it's been years of getting to this point. It's hard to believe that we're here now. How much of wiggle room is available left to the president, given that he's got this diminished political clout now, vastly diminished political clout?
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Obviously, at the moment, all the legal avenues have been exhausted in terms of having the NPA taking a decision to charge or not to charge former President Zuma. And as you rightly pointed out, we are here today because of that decision which was taken by the former NPA boss, Bulelani Ngcuka, who said the prospects of winning a case against Jacob Zuma, then the Deputy President, are slim. But then we know that he argued that to some extent there was a political meddling in the decision which was taken by the NPA to proceed with the prosecution. But very important, you remember already you have a judgment against Shabir Sheikh. And as we know, in any relationship, you have two parties, the corruptor and the corruptee. So the corruptor was convicted by the court. He appealed against the decision of his sentence for 15 years, and ultimately he received a medical parole which resulted into the presidential pardon. But remember, Shabir Sheikh faced 15 charges, but he was found guilty on 2 counts of corruption, 1 on fraud and 1 on bribe. And if you read the judgment, it indirectly implicates Zuma, but he was not on trial. So this time around, we may likely see a scenario where the NPA finally decides to have Zuma facing a trial. And it will be interesting to see how that particular process will unfold. But remember also, if the NPA today does not decide to charge Zuma, Gerry Neil is waiting in the wings to proceed or pursue a private prosecution. So you're right, he's facing a crossroad this time around.
Advocate Hoffman, let's bring you into the discussion here. We're talking about Shaun Abrahams announcing this decision. The decision itself, though, wasn't made by the NPA head alone. He had a panel of the country's top prosecutors helping him to come to that decision.
Yes, I think Shaun Abrahams has painted himself into a corner because of the dispute as to whether his appointment is valid or not. The full bench of the High Court in Gauteng has said that his appointment is invalid and that he should be replaced. That decision is on appeal, and judgment has been reserved in the appeal. We expect the Constitutional Court to determine the appeal in the not-too-distant future. So he is now in the position where his appointment is being questioned if on the advice of the panel that he has put together, he announces tomorrow, or as soon as he's told ex-President Zuma about the decision, that the prosecution is being proceeded with. He will be pilloried by some commentators who will say, see how he changes the support depending on which way the wind is blowing at Lutuli House. And if he chooses not to prosecute ex-President Zuma, he will be criticized by other people who will say, see, we told you all along he is President Zuma's protector, one of the keepers of the Zuma presidency. So I think no matter what he announces, there will be unhappiness. If he comes to the conclusion that the prosecution should go ahead, it is open to President Zuma to take review proceedings against that decision, and we expect on his Stalingrad strategy track record that he will do that. And we already know that the DA, which spent between 2009 and 2017 pursuing the reinstatement of the charges, that the DA, if it is unsatisfied with the decision that is announced probably tomorrow, it will take review proceedings. So we're a long way from the dock in a criminal trial, as the history of the matter would indicate.
Dr. Koma, what is your view in terms of whether President, I mean, we're just sort of making our own projections here, but whether former President Jacob Zuma will take this decision, should it go against him on review, given that that decision was made that he should pay some of his legal fees from his own pocket? I mean, that amount must run into millions. What's the likelihood that he will take this case on review, do you think?
Yes, Michelle, we are in for a long haul. Firstly, because even if today or tomorrow the NPA decides to charge President Zuma, is still within his legal right to take the matter up on review. And also, even if the matter were to be brought before the court, he can still take the judgment to the Supreme Court of Appeal to appeal against the decision of that, and ultimately go to the Constitutional Court and raise the issue of, oh, I did not receive a fair trial from the lower courts. So this process or case may drag for almost 6 years before finally Zuma is sentenced or convicted.
And Advocate Hoffman, you believe that former President Zuma has the appetite to drag this on for yet another 6 years?
Well, it seems that the legal team that is engaged is very enamored of what we call the Stalingrad strategy. That is the strategy of the Russians fighting the Germans in World War II, where the battle for Stalingrad was fought street by street, house by house, and no quarter was given. So he would not be running true to form if he were to turn around and say, okay, bring it on. You've got 18 charges against me. I've always said that I'm innocent. Let's have it out in a criminal trial. It's far more likely that he will seek to review whatever decision against him is taken, whether it's for all 18 charges or only some of them. You'll recall that there are over 200 witnesses that the NPA has lined up for this trial, and they are all still available and prepared to give evidence against President Zuma. If he has or had witnesses that he can no longer call, he may seek to use that as a basis for reviewing the decision. Time will tell.
Dr. Koma, let's bring the discussion back to studio and just talk about Shaun Abrahams himself. I mean, he's now making this massive decision as NPA head. His position, though, is also under question on the sidelines of this issue.
Yeah, exactly. The appointment of Shaun Abrahams as a fit and proper person to head the NPA is a matter that is sub judice. It's before the court. But you're right. His fitness raises questions whether is he the right person to make this kind of prosecution decision on this particular momentous decision which faces a former president. But Michelle, remember, it's not unprecedented to have former presidents facing prosecution. We have seen in Italy, former Prime Minister Berlusconi, who was convicted on tax fraud. He was sentenced for 5 years, but then because the Italian court provides for community service for offenders over the age of 70, he's now, instead of serving a prison sentence, he's serving a community service. But there are a whole range of cases against him, some on sex charges, some on bribe, some on fraud, and all of that. So in South Africa, we are likely to see that kind of a situation, that a former president in a constitutional democracy, for the first time, will face a trial. Of course, he's been there before with the other case, which was obviously on rape. But we are likely to see a very massive case involving a former president, which has to do with fraud allegations, money laundering, racketeering, bribe, and all of that. But this also speaks to the beauty about our constitutional setup, to say our judiciary is working quite well, and also you have, to some extent, the NPA that still has a semblance of independence.
Advocate Hoffman, let's talk a bit about the NPA itself. I mean, its integrity, its reputation, some would say, taken a knock with Shaun Abrahams at the helm. But given what you've said about the criticism that will most likely follow, whichever decision he makes today or tomorrow, he announces today or tomorrow, will this decision go any way in restoring confidence in our prosecuting authority?
I'm afraid it won't, no matter which way he goes. He will be regarded as a sellout by those who support Zuma if he says, let's go ahead and prosecute, and he will be regarded as a Zuma protector or Zuma keeper if he decides the other way. And I think that it is fair to say that since Zuma became president, which was in 2009, the NPA has taken a great deal of strain in its upper management levels. Two of the senior appointees, Jiba and Moreba, have been struck off the roll as being unfit to fulfill the role of advocate in the course of the Zuma administration. Those two cases are on appeal. When Abrahams was appointed, he immediately stopped criminal proceedings against Jiba, which should not have been stopped. During the course of his tenure, charges against Zuma relating to the corrupt way in which his predecessor, Nkosana, was dismissed or disappointed by Zuma with a huge payment which ought not to have been made. Nothing has been done about the criminal implications of that particular transaction, nor has anything been done in the criminal justice administration in relation to the irregularities and criminality involved in the money expended in Nkandla homestead of President Zuma. So quite apart from the 18 charges relating to his relationship with Shabir Sheikh, there is still pending and unattended to by the Abrahams-led NPA a criminal case of corruption in relation to getting rid of Nkosana, and a criminal case arising out of Nkandla. There's also the problem that the first National Director of Public Prosecutions who was appointed in the Zuma years was Menzi Simelane, and his appointment was struck down by the courts as an irrational appointment because Simelane was put in place to look after the interests of the president rather than to operate independently without fear, favor, or prejudice as the head of an independent NPA. And it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort to recover from the damage done to the independence of the NPA as a consequence of President Zuma making decisions as president for his own benefit rather than for the public benefit. He did that in many ways, and in particular, he was concerned that the criminal justice administration should be tailored to see to it that he would never see the inside of a court.
Dr. Koma, perhaps just some closing comments from you, given that saga that Advocate Hoffman has just outlined for us. I mean, the whisperings around political interference has dogged this issue since the very beginning, and the political implications following it, wherever it goes, it appears.
Exactly. Yeah, if you follow the judgment which was delivered by the Supreme Court of Appeal against the late Judge Nicholson, who in fact is the one who exonerated President Zuma from this particular case. So they rightly pointed out to say the NPA has to execute its constitutional mandate without fear, favor, or prejudice, and they should not allow the executive to interfere in their day-to-day prosecuting work. So even today, if Shaun Abrahams decides to prosecute Zuma, that does not make him a fit and proper person, because the matter is still before the court. And the court said the deputy president then should be the one who appoints the new head of NPA because of the conflictual relationship between former President Zuma and also Shaun Abrahams. So either way, it does not, he just have to save his skin, but it doesn't make him a capable, independent prosecutor.
Well, gentlemen, this is an incredibly difficult story to unpack, but thanks very much for your help in doing so. Dr. Sam Koma is head of the School of Governance at the Milpark Business School, and joining us via our Skype line, Advocate Paul Hoffman, Director of Accountability Now.